Hi, welcome back to my channel. So, I just finished my first draft of my first novel, and woohoo, that's amazing. And everyone's like, oh my god, when can I read it? That's so good, well done. And I'm like, whoa, you can't read it yet because there's a lot of work to do. And I think through talking to people who don't write and don't write like books, I've come to realize that people really don't understand the editing process. They think it's done, so you're going to proofread it, right? And then maybe I can read it. And editing is about a lot more than proofreading and checking the grammar. So today I'm going to get into what editing process I'm going to be following and just talk a little bit about each stage. So this process is a 6-stage summary that I learned on TikTok from Gina Denny, who is a literary agent. She's great. She makes loads of TikToks all about making your writing better and about the publishing process. Not only is she a literary agent, but she does work as an editor as well. So I found her TikTok page really useful, lots of educational content about the querying process and the writing process. And this is what she had to say. This was her process, and I trust her. So she says editing stage one is your structural edit. And this actually comes in a bit earlier. It can come in before you've even written the draft. This is where you set out your plot and your structure. You might have 3 acts or 4 acts, and you're going to want to figure out what happens when in each act. This is basically like the tent poles of your novel, so if they're not in place, the whole thing is going to fall down, and this is why this has to come first before you get into spelling and whatnot, because it's going to save you a lot of time. So I already did a lot of plotting and outlining for this book, so I feel like this stage is kind of done, but I will review this by reading the whole book and seeing if what I planned has actually worked and check the structural integrity of the work is sound. Currently, as it stands, I think it is, but I'm going to go through it and double check. Stage number 2 is the character edit. This is where you want to make sure everything about your characters is correct and appropriate for the book. You want to check what age they are, what their demographics are, what their literal character and personality is. You want to make sure that at each point of the novel they have an arc that's mapped out properly against the plot. And you want to make sure what they're doing is kind of coherent and makes sense for them as a character. There's things about this that I definitely do need to work on with the book. So, what do they know at that time in the novel? Sometimes I have my characters saying things that I know, but they don't know yet. So, that's going to take a lot of editing to kind of get continuity with. You also want to look at like all your minor characters and make sure they're all doing what they're supposed to be doing. Like, do they need to be there? Are they fleshed out enough? Did they have their own arc? And if they don't and they're kind of unimportant, maybe we could cut them entirely. Because for a first novel in particular, you really don't want it to be over 100,000 words, and mine's is just over that. So we want to trim the fat a little bit where we can. And I think my side characters do need quite a lot of work, honestly. I've really focused on my 2 main characters and their arcs, and I think they're pretty good, apart from some of these little continuity errors. But all of my side characters and my antagonists 100% need a lot more work. So that's what I'm going to be fixing first after making sure that the structure is in place, because changing what the characters literally do and say is going to be quite a big change and quite fundamental. So good to do that early in the process. Thank you for the tip, Gina. Then stage 3 is going to be your world building edit. This is similar to the character edit. You want to make sure your world makes sense, it's fleshed out, the rules are consistent and consistent throughout the whole book. I came up with some new ideas and new rules as the book went on, so some of those changed and there's continuity errors. There's also a lot of like technical things, like there's a tunnel system in the book. How does that work? What does the map look like? I need to get really clear on this. Even like the boundary of the society. Is it a fence? Is it a wall? I need to decide that. Make sure that's consistently explained throughout the book. This is all huge and it all has to make sense and it's quite fundamental. So that is stage 3. Of course, your world and your characters interact quite a lot. So this does go quite hand in hand with the characters. So I might have to like flip flop between stage 2 and stage 3 a little bit because they will interact. But once that is done and that all makes sense, the whole book should make sense by this point. So then we're going to get into some finer tuning. Stage 4 is the scene edit. This is where you look at every single scene, make sure that scene works and is absolutely necessary. If it's not, you can cut it, save yourself some words. In the beginning of my process, I did map out my scenes quite well. I had my 3 acts and I had like scene 1, scene 2, scene 3. I had a bit of a table that said who, what, when, where, why, wow. So, who's in the scene, what is the setting, why is this scene here? Like, what are we learning? And the wow is kind of like, why is it entertaining for the reader? What is the pizzazz here? Like, is it boring? If it's not wowing, how can we make it more wow? What are the wow features of the scene? This was really good at getting clarity and planning out what was going to happen. As I went through the process, I did give up on doing that. So, as I read through the book early on in my first few read throughs, I'm going to map my scenes against this table because that will help me understand the structure anyway, and also the character and the world building, having like what the reader needs to learn about the world into that table, into the why, um, what they have to learn about the characters into the why. That's going to be really helpful for all of those stages of editing. So, yeah, I'm going to fill in the rest of the table. I think the start of my book is planned out really well because it was a rewrite of stuff I'd written earlier. And as we get to the second half and the final third, it was going off the rails a bit more because I was just more in the zone and just seeing what worked. So, yes, there might be some quite heavy scene revisions towards the end. We shall see. Once I've done that, we're then going to go on to stage 5, which is the nuance edit. And at this point, everything in the book should be where it's going to be and it should make sense. But here, we're going to really make it pop and shine. So in the nuance edit, I want to really make sure that the themes and like the philosophy, the politics, the mental health, all of these deeper themes, I want to make sure they're represented well, that I'm saying what I want to say, and it's effective. And at the moment, a lot of it is quite tell, not show, because I'm kind of telling myself the story in the first draft. Some of it's heavy handed and it's spelled out. So I'm going to make sure it's more nuanced, it's more implied. We're going to make sure we're showing interiority of the characters. We're going to make sure there's subtext and metaphor, and that I'm using like the right precise language and words for these things because the word you choose to use changes the whole meaning of the sentence. So I want to make sure everything is good, everything's popping, and try to make the language beautiful. This is where you work on your prose and making the sentence flow nice and sound nice. You want to pick up on those moments where you're using similar words too close together and change the words. I do that as I go through anyway. I always read the last session before going on to the next session, and these quite obvious things I pick up on and change and edit as I go. But yeah, obviously I'll have changed a lot about the characters and the world and structure perhaps by this point, so it's going to need to be done again, especially if there's quite a lot of patchworking going on of taking things out, putting things in, etc. You need to make sure the flow is correct and reads nicely. And I also write from dual POVs, from 2 very different characters. So obviously my voice comes through quite a lot with both of the characters and it makes them sound a little bit similar. So I want to make sure linguistically they have some differences. Because one of them is more literate than the other. He's more well read just because he's a rebel and this is a society where you're not really allowed to read. So, of course, they're going to have different voices. And I'm going to need to come up with some like grammar rules and colloquial terms that either of them use and then sprinkle that into both POVs without being too heavy handed, just enough so that the voices sound distinct. So that's technical craft level stuff. And then finally, you've got your line edit. So this is the part that everyone thinks about when you say editing. This is going through, checking the spelling, checking the grammar, checking things like capitalization, because I have some words in this like culture that are capitalized, like that's grammatically incorrect technically, but the same way you would capitalize like the father. If you were speaking about God or a dictator, we have a similar kind of capitalization here. So I need to decide which words are capitalized, stick to that as a consistent rule throughout, and things like that. And then we'll be done, I think. It'll be time to get some proofreading and some beta reading from other people. My mum was a university lecturer. She's very used to marking people's theses and things. She's done a lot of proofreading and reviewing of my academic work in the past. So she's going to read it. She's a big reader anyway. I think she's going to be really useful at giving like objective feedback. And I'm also going to find some people, maybe friends, if you're watching this, want to volunteer, let me know. But I'm going to find some friends that also like to just read in this genre anyway, that would genuinely pick up a book like this and get their opinion on it as well. Because my mum wouldn't really read this genre of new adult novel anyway, so it's not really her market. So it's important to get people, peers, people that I can trust to be honest with me and not just be like, yay, that was really good. Um, People that can be objective and that read a lot in the genre anyway, that can tell me honestly if it measures up or falls short of published books that they've read. But still, even though my mum doesn't read in that genre, I do want my book to be good enough where someone can read it and enjoy it, even if it's not their normal type of thing. Like Hunger Games is a young adult novel, but lots of adults like it, and it might be simple for them. It's an accessible read, but it still deals with big themes and it's still well executed for the genre. So I want to hold myself to a similar standard. So if my mum thinks it's readable and not complete trash and has something to say, that's good. And then I can get opinions of people who would actually be a genuine organic fan of the genre anyway. So that's the plan. And then it will be querying time, which will be scary. So I'm not going to think about it too much right now. Anyway, thank you for watching. Subscribe to watch me go through this editing process. Maybe I'll make a video at each stage and let you know how it went. That would be a cool series for me to do. Let me know if you would like that. Subscribe and follow me on Instagram to follow this journey. And let me know if you're in the editing trenches as well and we can be in it together. Thanks for watching. Bye!